That line, half a joke, half something else, floated from the back hallway, followed by a laugh too confident to belong to anyone shy. "If you don't touch me now, I'll scream her name." The way she said it, playful, but edged with something dangerous, made me freeze mid-step. Then came another voice, lower, amused, older. "You're impossible, Claire." That one I knew. Mara. The shop was almost empty that Thursday afternoon, just the quiet hum of the coffee machine and the smell of motor oil from the garage next door seeping through the vents. I was finishing up invoices, pretending not to eavesdrop on the woman who owned the place, Amara, and her visiting stepsister. I'd started working for her 6 months ago, fixing what she called the old bones of her bookstore cafe, the leaking pipes, the buzzing lights, the shelves that leaned a little too much like drunks. I stayed longer than I needed to, maybe because I liked the sound of her voice when she asked for help without ever sounding helpless. When Mara finally appeared from the back, her expression was that of someone who'd had to tolerate a storm with a polite smile. Her stepsister, the one with the line that started all this, followed behind, smirking, the kind of smirk that left no mystery about intent. Mara caught me looking. And that was the first pause. She didn't blush. She didn't look away. She just studied me, like she was trying to decide if I'd heard anything, and if it mattered. Then she did what she always did when things got too close. She turned her attention to the coffee machine. "Sorry about the noise," she said, without looking up. "She likes to make everything sound like theater." I shrugged. "I've worked in louder places." A small smile tugged at her mouth, the kind that lived somewhere between humor and exhaustion. "I don't doubt it." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It just lingered. The air between us had a weight I hadn't felt before, as if that overheard line had pulled something invisible into focus. I watched her move, sleeves rolled up, a faint ink stain on her wrist, a loose strand of hair catching the light. She wasn't the type you'd call fragile. Everything about her was deliberate, restrained, even the way she placed a mug on the counter like she was setting down a thought she hadn't quite finished. "Do you ever stop fixing things?" she asked suddenly, glancing at my hands, still dusted with sawdust. I laughed softly. "Only when they stop breaking." She met my eyes then, steady, direct. "And what about people?" I didn't answer. Neither did she. The hum of the fridge filled the space where something else could have lived. Her stepsister eventually reappeared, sunglasses in hand, smirk still intact. "I like him," she said, walking past me. "You shouldn't keep him here too long, Mara. He might start seeing too much." Mara's eyes didn't leave mine when she replied, calm as ever, "He already sees more than most." That line, quiet, almost careless, landed deeper than I expected. I didn't know what she meant. Maybe she didn't either. Later, after closing, I caught my reflection in the window, the shop lights fading, her shadow moving somewhere in the back room. I thought about her stepsister's voice again, teasing, dangerous, echoing in the hallway. But it wasn't her words that stayed with me. It was Mara's look, the one that said nothing at all, yet somehow made everything inside me go still. And when I walked out into the cold night, I realized I'd started listening for her voice in the silence, just to know she was still there. The next time I saw Mara, the bookstore smelled like rain and old pages, a mix that felt heavier than usual. The front window fogged over each time the door opened, and she was there behind the counter, sleeves rolled to her elbows, sorting through boxes that looked older than either of us. "Shipment came early," she said, without looking up. "I didn't want to bother you." "You're not bothering me," I said, setting my jacket aside. "That's kind of the job, isn't it?" Her mouth curved slightly, but she didn't answer. She just kept pulling books from the box, stacking them neatly, one over another, poetry, travel, a few that looked like they'd been read too many times. Her fingers moved slowly, almost tenderly. I noticed how careful she was with the worn spines, how her thumb lingered on one title longer than the rest. "You ever read that one?" I asked. She glanced at me. "Once. A long time ago." Her voice softened on the last part. Something about it, the tone, maybe the pause, made me stop what I was doing. There was a distance in her that wasn't there before, like she was looking at something I couldn't see. The rain tapped harder against the windows. She brushed her hair behind her ear, exhaled, and said quietly, "You ever get tired of pretending you're fine?" I didn't know if she was asking me or herself. "Sometimes," I said. "Mostly when someone asks." That got a real smile, small, genuine, the kind that caught her off guard. But then it faded just as quickly, and she turned away to hide it. There was a small moment then, a silence that didn't feel like absence. I watched the light shift across her face, the faint shadows under her eyes, the way her hand trembled when she reached for another box. "You should go home," I said gently. "Don't," she interrupted. Her voice wasn't sharp, but it carried something fragile. "Don't finish that." I nodded, quietly. She didn't owe me softness. I went back to unpacking books, letting the rhythm fill the silence, her near, me closer than I needed to be. Every few minutes, our hands brushed over the same object, brief, unplanned. She didn't move away, but she didn't look at me either. When we finished, she leaned against the counter, rubbing her wrist absent-mindedly. "You're good at fixing things," she said. "Only things that let me," I said before thinking. She looked up then, really looked. For a heartbeat, there was no guard, no distance, just something open and raw flickering across her eyes. Then she broke it with a soft laugh. "Careful," she said. "That sounds almost like understanding." "Maybe it is," I murmured. The rain had stopped, but neither of us moved toward the door. She handed me my jacket, her fingers brushing mine just enough to feel like an accident, but not enough to believe it was one. When I left, I didn't look back. But I could still feel the warmth of her touch on my sleeve, long after it should have faded. It was closing time again, and the storm outside sounded like it was trying to peel the roof off the building. The lights flickered twice, just enough to make the room feel smaller. Mara sighed, staring at the switchboard near the back door. "That's the second time this week," she muttered. "If it cuts again, we'll lose the register records." "I can check the wiring," I offered. She hesitated. "Now?" I shrugged. "You'll just worry about it all night otherwise." That earned me a faint look, half amusement, half defeat. "You're not wrong." So I stayed. The others had already left, the sign flipped to closed. Rain blurred the street outside into soft motion. The place smelled like coffee and thunder, that metallic edge of electricity hanging in the air. She brought me a flashlight, her fingers brushing mine as she passed it. "Don't get shocked," she said. "Wouldn't be the worst thing," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked to mine, quick, sharp, then away. "Don't say that," she murmured. We didn't talk much after that. The storm filled the silence, and the narrow space behind the counter forced us closer. She crouched beside me as I opened the fuse box. The light caught the curve of her wrist, the steady rise and fall of her breathing. I could feel her warmth even without touching her. "You always this persistent?" she asked quietly. "Only when something's worth fixing." A soft breath escaped her, a laugh, or something close to it. "That's dangerous," she said. "Thinking people can be fixed." "Didn't say people," I replied. "Just things that pretend they're fine." That made her look up. For a long second, neither of us moved. The hum of the lights, the thunder, everything else blurred out. Her hand was on the counter, inches from mine. The flashlight beam trembled a little in my grip. Then her phone buzzed on the table, breaking it. The sound was too loud, too sudden. She blinked, stood up quickly, like she'd remembered herself. The screen lit her face in blue. The name on it made her expression shift, small, but unmistakable. She didn't answer right away. Just stared. Someone important? I asked before I could stop myself. Her voice was low. Someone I should have stopped answering years ago. She turned the phone over, screen down, and leaned against the wall. For a moment, she looked older than I'd ever seen her, not in years, but in weight. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. You shouldn't I be here? I finished for her. She nodded once. Probably. The light flickered again. I should have moved, should have said something safe. Instead, I stood there, watching the storm paint her silhouette against the window, her hair damp from the humidity, her hands still resting on the counter where mine had almost been. I reached out, just enough for her to feel the air shift. She didn't step away. The lights came back on with a sharp hum, and she exhaled like she'd been holding her breath too long. I should lock up, she said softly. I nodded. Yeah. But when she passed me the keys, her fingers stayed on mine for a second too long, not enough to mean something. Just enough to make sure I'd think about it all night. The shop stayed dark when I walked past each evening, no lights, no music, no sign of her silhouette behind the counter. On the third night, I found the note on the door. Closed for inventory. It wasn't. I knocked anyway. After a moment, I heard footsteps. The lock turned once, hesitated, then opened. Mara stood there in a sweater too large for her, sleeves pulled over her hands. The smell of rain was still in the air. Behind her, the store was dim, lit only by a small lamp on the counter. I thought you might come, she said quietly. You left the lights off, I said. She smiled faintly. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Then why open the door? That stopped her. She stepped back to let me in, wordless. The air inside felt thick, not tense, just unspoken. There were open boxes scattered across the floor, but nothing had been moved. She'd been sitting in stillness, waiting, though she'd never admit it. We stood there, facing each other, the silence expanding until it almost hurt. Mara, I started. If you don't want me here, I didn't say that. Then what is this? Her eyes flickered, then held mine. I don't know, she said finally. She paused, searching. You're kind. Too kind. And I can't decide if that's what makes this easier or harder. I took a slow breath. I'm not trying to make it anything. Then why does it feel like you are? Her voice cracked at the edge, barely, but enough to make me step closer before I caught myself. She noticed. Of course she did. You don't have to fix me, she whispered. I'm not one of your shelves or your switches. I know. Then stop looking at me like I could be. That one hit harder than I expected. I wanted to say something, tell her I wasn't looking for anything, that I didn't even understand what this was turning into. But the truth stayed caught in my throat. She turned away, pressing her palms against the counter. You're young, she said. You still believe that wanting something means you should have it. And you? I learned that wanting is the part that ruins you. The rain outside softened into a steady rhythm. She closed her eyes like she was listening to it. I keep telling myself to stop, she said, barely audible. To stop talking to you like this. To stop waiting for you to walk in. But then you do, and she didn't finish. The quiet between us filled everything that words couldn't. I stepped closer, just enough for the space to disappear but not enough to touch. Her breath hitched, and for a second, I thought she'd move away. She didn't. We just stood there, close enough to feel the tremor of each other's restraint. When she finally spoke again, her voice was almost gone. "Don't look at me like that," she said. "You'll make me forget who's supposed to know better." The storm had passed, but the air still felt unsettled, like the quiet after something that doesn't quite end. I came by the shop the next morning with a new light fixture, thinking work might make things normal again. It didn't. Mara was sitting at one of the tables, a box of old receipts beside her, though she wasn't sorting them. She was staring at something small in her hands, a photo, creased at the edges. She looked up when I entered. "You're early," she said. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. "Neither could I." Her voice was low, unsteady, not in tone, in weight. I set the fixture on the counter, unsure if I should stay or leave. Then she said, almost to herself, "He used to stand right where you are." I frowned. "Who?" She turned the photo around. A man, maybe my age, laughing, arm around her shoulders. Her hair was shorter then, her smile wider. "His name was Daniel," she said. "He worked here before I owned the place. He used to fix things too." There was a pause, not for effect, but because she was trying to steady her voice. "He left," she said. "Not because of me. Because life does what it does. One day he just didn't come back." I didn't know what to say. She wasn't crying, but her eyes had that distant shine, like she was somewhere far away, looking at a version of herself that hadn't learned to hold back yet. She laughed then, quietly. "You even stand like him. Same way of pretending you're not waiting for something." "I'm not him," I said gently. "I know," she said. "That's the problem." The words landed like a soft thud, small, final, irreversible. I sat down across from her. The photo lay between us, two faces from a life I'd never known. I could see the tremor in her hand, the faint ring mark on the table from an untouched cup of tea. "Did you love him?" I asked. "I don't know if I did," she said. "But I remember what it felt like to want to." The clock ticked in the background. It was the only sound. "I thought that part of me was gone," she added. "Until you started fixing things." I exhaled slowly. "And now?" She looked at me, and for once, there was no guard. Just exhaustion and something that might have been fear. "Now I don't know if you're helping me remember, or making me forget." Her hand brushed the photo, then stopped, fingers trembling slightly before pulling away. I wanted to reach for it, for her, but I didn't. The moment didn't need touching to break, it already had. She stood up quietly, walked to the counter, and spoke without turning around. "Don't try to fix the light today," she said. "I need to see what the dark still feels like." And with that, she switched the lamp off, leaving only the faint gray light from the window, her silhouette against it, sharp and fragile at once, and the sound of my heartbeat where words used to be. The next evening, the shop was nearly empty. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the windows streaked with pale light from the street. The air smelled faintly of dust and old wood, still, after everything, somehow comforting. Mara was sitting behind the counter, eyes unfocused, as if she'd been staring at nothing for a long time. The lamp she'd turned off yesterday was still dark. I didn't knock this time. She didn't flinch when I walked in. "You left the door open," I said. "I know. You never do." "I know that, too." Something in her tone, not sad, just tired, told me she wasn't expecting me to leave. I set my jacket down and leaned against the counter beside her. For a while, neither of us said anything. The clock ticked softly in the corner. Outside, tires hissed over the wet street. She finally broke the quiet. "I've been thinking about what you said." "I said too much," I replied. No, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You said enough. She turned slightly, her face half lit by the streetlight outside. You remind me of who I was before I learned how to live without wanting anything. That's not fair to you. I don't need fair, I said. I just don't want to pretend this isn't happening. She smiled then, a real one, small and sad. It's not happening, and it is. That's the truth. She folded her hands in front of her, the same hands I'd watched fix broken shelves and pour endless cups of coffee. They trembled just slightly now. Do you ever wish you'd met someone at the wrong time? She asked, and the timing never got better. I think that's how most people meet, I said. Her laugh came out quiet, unsteady, a sound halfway between release and regret. You make it sound survivable. It is, I said. Just not simple. The silence that followed didn't hurt this time. It felt full. Honest. I reached for her hand, slow enough to let her stop me. She didn't. Our fingers met, not searching, not claiming, just being. Her thumb brushed over mine once, absent-mindedly, like she was remembering a language she hadn't spoken in years. She looked at me then, really looked, and something in her expression softened, unraveled. Don't say anything, she murmured. Let's not ruin it by explaining. So we didn't. We just sat there, her hand still in mine, her shoulder barely touching my arm, the space between us finally quiet. The lamp stayed off. We didn't need the light anymore. After a while, she leaned her forehead against my temple, a small, human gesture that felt heavier than any confession. I don't know where this goes, she whispered. Maybe it doesn't have to, I said. And for the first time, it didn't feel like loss. It felt like truth, the kind that doesn't demand, doesn't promise, just exists. When I finally left, the door clicked softly behind me. Through the glass, I could still see her sitting there in the dark, calm, still, her face turned toward the light outside. Neither of us waved. We didn't need to. Something had already stayed behind. The shop still smells the same old pages, dust, rain-soaked wood. But the light feels different now. Softer. Like it stopped trying to fill every corner. Mara still runs it, still rolls her sleeves up to her elbows, still moves with that quiet precision that makes everything around her seem steadier. But something in her has changed, or maybe I've just learned how to see her without looking for what's missing. We don't talk about what happened that night. We never named it, never defined it. Maybe that's what makes it still breathe between us. Sometimes, when I drop by, she'll slide a mug across the counter without a word. I'll fix something small, a hinge, a flickering light, and she'll watch for a moment longer than she needs to. Then she'll smile that half smile, the one that used to break me open, and say, "You really don't know how to leave things broken, do you?" And I'll answer, "Not the ones that matter." She'll shake her head like she doesn't believe me, but she does. I can see it in the way her shoulders loosen, the way her voice warms when she says my name. What changed? Maybe everything. Maybe nothing. I learned that love, or whatever lives near it, doesn't always need to be claimed to be real. That sometimes the most honest thing you can do is stop trying to make something last, and let it mean instead. She taught me that silence can say what words ruin, that care can live in the smallest gestures, a look, a hand brushing yours when neither of you are reaching. And she learned, I think, that being seen doesn't have to mean being caught. We still exist in that quiet in-between, not lovers, not strangers. Something else. Something honest. And it's enough. The last time I saw her, she was closing early. The sky outside was dim and gold, the kind of light that turns everything softer than it really is. She stood in the doorway, hair pulled back, eyes on the street. "Still fixing things?" she asked. "Still trying," I said. She smiled, a small, knowing curve. Some things don't need fixing. They just need to be left, remembered. That was the last thing she said before the door closed. But even now, every time it rains, I think about that moment, the sound of her voice, steady but lighter, as if she'd finally learned how to let go without losing anything. Maybe that's what love really is, not staying, not leaving, but knowing when it's already enough. And in some quiet, unexplainable way, it still is. Sparkles, if this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?